Okay, good afternoon, everybody. At this time, I will call to order the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners for a special joint meeting with the Cabarrus County Board of Education.
Board of Education members, I'd like to ask for a motion to reconvene from a recess. I have a motion by Mr. Harrison and a second by Mr. Walter. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the Board of Education is now in session.
Okay, and I would like to turn it over to our mediator.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Thorns Craven. I'm here as the mediator in the dispute that has arisen between the county commissioners of Cabarrus County and the Board of Education of Cabarrus County. And this is the opening public event. Both of you are in public session, and this is an opportunity for you to have a conversation about what's going to happen, what has happened, whatever you want to have a conversation about. Mediation is something that often needs a little bit of an explanation. I'm sure that you all have had a conversation with your attorneys about how this thing goes. Let me just say a couple of things. Often, all of us mediators start by saying what mediation isn't. It's not a trial, and a mediator is not a judge. I'm here to help you all have a conversation which could lead to the resolution of your dispute, but the decision to do that is in each of your hands, not in mine. And the opportunity to do that is on this occasion and as we proceed. There's an opportunity to do what, when I first started doing this, when I first became a lawyer, I thought if I could just get in a room with the other side and explain to them why they were wrong, that things would work out. And I've discovered since that education actually is not just teaching to other people, it's learning from other people. So I've often tried to describe this to people that I've worked with as the educational opportunity that is not afforded to us in most of the legal settings that we're in, because there's all of the process and procedure and the fact that you're handing the decision-making authority to some third party. But here you retain it, you make the decisions, and you essentially set the process. I'm here to help you do that, everybody here. There'll be an opportunity for each board and your council and your professional leadership to do whatever it is you want to do in this session. When everybody has done all of that, and it's reached a point where you all have exhausted those comments and questions and whatever you want to do, I'm probably going to say if we've done all we can do together, then it's time for me to spend some time talking to people privately and separately. And I think you know that the way this works in this setting is that there are working groups that are appointed by each board. Generally the council, the professional leadership, and the chairman of the board. Am I right about that? Is there anybody else that's required in these? And the finance officers, right. And so when we reach that point, I'll be talking to them, and then they can report back to the full boards, and we can move on from there. And we will go on as you see fit and as you desire and as I see things. One of the things that I've often also described my role is that I sometimes see things that, because I'm not involved in the dispute and not got a particular point of view, I can sometimes see things that you all might not be seeing because you're concentrating so completely on the things that are most important to you. So that's what I'll be looking for, listening for. I encourage you to listen to everything with new ears today. I know that there's been a lot of conversations already and a lot of public comment and publicity, but this is a chance to start from the ground up and see where we can go. Anybody got any questions? Okay. Then it's up to you all who wants to go first. I suspect most people are waiting for the school board. Is that right?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair Poole, County Commissioners, Mr. Cook, and Mr. Craven. On behalf of the Cabarrus County Board of Education, we appreciate this opportunity to meet with you pursuant to state statute to discuss the fiscal year 2015 budget in this joint board meeting. Mr. Craven, we're particularly appreciative of your willingness to serve as our neutral in this matter. on such short notice. As a little bit of background, the Cabarrus County Board of Education adopted its proposed fiscal year 2015 budget on April 14th, 2014. This budget was adopted after 4 budget committee meetings, a public hearing, and numerous discussions at board work sessions. We're particularly proud of the hard work from the budget committee, which consists of board members, school administrator representatives, parent and community representatives, members of the cabinet, the county manager, deputy managers, and financial and budget directors. The Budget Committee utilized what's known as the TRIGO decision-making process to prioritize the various requests. In addition, our budget has also been opened up to a community survey. The proposed budget set forth the request for just over $66 million in current expense operating and about $118 million in capital outlay. As of Monday, the commissioners have allocated approximately 75% of our current expense request and barely 1% of our capital outlay needs. Put that in context, the capital outlay budget from the county is not even enough to fund the 12 new school buses needed by the district. Cabarrus County Schools has not purchased a new school bus since 2008, despite opening 3 new schools, starting 5 magnet programs, and the early college in that time period. A detailed budget request with supporting information has been provided to the commissioners, and we have additional paper copies for all of you today if you'd like a copy. To put the board's budget in perspective, Cabarrus County Schools currently ranks 111th out of 115 LEAs in total per pupil funding in North Carolina. Cabarrus County's per capita income is 21st in the state. However, we're 57th in local funding. Our current local expense funding levels are lower than that of all of our neighbors, Rowan, Union, Iredell, and Mecklenburg. For several years, the Board of Education and its administrators has tried to work very closely with the commissioners to propose a budget to be in line with the commissioner expectations. This year, the board felt they had to make a change. The need for continuation costs to simply continue operating at the same level of service as currently provided, moderate expansion, and desperately needed facilities and capital outlay requests caused the increase. In addition, at joint meetings between these two boards, the commissioners have requested that the Board of Education include its capital needs in this budget process. Looking first at the current expense allocation, in summary, we've received approximately 75% of this request. However, the basic operating costs, the continuation costs to cover increases in staff for the new school we're proposing to open, and just normal increases in utilities, retirement, health insurance costs have not been fully funded. In addition, there's a request for expansion. There's also a need to be fully funded for charter schools. We understand on Monday you all did increase the charter school amount, and we look forward to discussing that with you in more detail today. But we do need to be 100% fully funded for our charter school students, as is a pass-through amount for us. Turning to the significant capital outlay requests, right now the Cabarrus County Board of Education needs full funding for 3 new schools: the elementary on the Old Eldell site, a replacement for Mount Pleasant Middle, and the Royal Oaks area replacement. Both boards appear to be in consensus that both Mount Pleasant Middle and Royal Oaks, due to their age, need to be replaced. We've received funding for Odell and Mount Pleasant Middle, but as of this time, the funding we've received is insufficient to build the complete school. We're approximately $2 million under for Odell and $6.5 million short on the Mount Pleasant Middle site. For Royal Oaks, we've requested funds for a replacement school in a manner deemed appropriate and necessary by school administration and this Board of Education. The proposed bond referendum for Royal Oaks is based on a per-student cost that appears to have no direct relationship to the anticipated construction costs. Further, we have significant amounts of deferred maintenance that has been put on hold for a number of years and is reaching it to a point where it may no longer be sustainable. All of this information has been provided to the commissioners in detail, and we're happy to review it with you. These maintenance projects include about $8 million to replace leaking roofs, money to fix and replace broken furniture, outdated HVAC units, and light fixtures. The justification documents included in our budget request fully document these pressing needs. Based on conversations between the two boards, it appears that many commissioners on the Board of Commission note the poor state of a number of our older schools. However, the Board of Education feels there has not been serious consideration of the school's capital needs. Finally, we believe the county has the ability to fund many of these needs without a tax increase, but with an appropriate budget and bond. As an example, the county's fund balance is $63 million, which is well in excess of the 8% level recommended for local governments and the 15% required by your own policies. The board is here today to continue the joint discussions regarding sufficient funding in order to maintain our system of free public schools. Board, do you have anything to add to this opening? No? Okay, thank you. We look forward to engaging in a conversation with you all to address these needs.
Thank you.
Chairman Kiger and members of the Board of Education of Cabarrus County. My name is Rich Cook. I serve as Cabarrus County Attorney. I will make a very brief opening statement. If any discussion about specific numbers, I will probably defer to either the county manager or to Pam Dubois, our deputy county manager, with reference to those. I think that certainly there have been a number of discussions between representatives of the Board of Education and the County Commission and the respective staffs concerning the appropriate funding level for the schools, both capital outlay and expense allocation. Those discussions have been extensive, and there have been a lot of numbers that have been shared both ways. I think one thing that can be said is that collectively, the Board of Commissioners, I think, has demonstrated that school funding is a priority for the county. And I think that's something that we can all agree on as a general proposition. It seems that we've had disagreements about how we get there and what the ways and means of those discussions should be and what the numbers should be. But I think there's no question that the Board of Commissioners and the staff of Cabarrus County consider school funding to be a priority. Certainly one fact that evidences that is the vote earlier this year to take $29 million of unallocated reserves that the county had and put those into a capital fund for schools, particularly for the two schools, Mount Pleasant Middle and the new Odell Elementary School. There have been questions on the part of this board about the costing for the schools, the new schools, and there have been extensive discussions concerning those. And it is true that from the school board's perspective that the amount of funding for those schools has been less than what has been requested. And I think that the position of the county was that what was allocated for those schools was appropriate until it was demonstrated that more was actually needed. And certainly we can have further discussions about that in the context of this mediation. As far as the expense allocation is concerned, I think there are a number of factors that go into that. What I understand from our staff is that there's a certain amount of funding that has been allocated for maintenance costs that has never been expended, and that's an issue that certainly needs to be discussed in this context. And that in addition to that, there's a considerable fund balance that the schools presently have that could be used or earmarked for some of these costs and expenses. But we are here pursuant to the statute, as Sarah referenced, to sit down and discuss these issues with you and hopefully come to some agreement. I think that it's fair for me to say that that's the desire of this board also, to try to work this out amicably and come to some agreement that gives the schools still the priority in terms of funding that we've promised, but also allows the county to take care of the other needs for which it's responsible.
All right. Is there any other? Okay. Questions, comments, back and forth? No requirement that they be asked and no requirement that they be answered. But this is an opportunity, if there's anything at this point anybody on either board wants to say.
Excuse us just one.
Sure.
Sure, we'll go ahead and get started. We understand at the board meeting Monday night, at the beginning, the county manager's budget included a revision. I believe it's what Mr. Cook and I have called back and forth, the orange revision, that included an additional allotment for the charter schools. If we could get some explanation on what that is and how that plays into the overall funding, that would be helpful, because I think we've tried to get some understanding as to what you all have included as a line item for the charters.
Through discussions with Dr. Shepard, Mike Downs, the county manager, myself, and Kelly Klutz, we had conversations in regards to the charter school enrollment for the new fiscal year. And through calculations, we came to what I thought was an agreement of an additional $827,000 for charter school students for next fiscal year. When you do the ADM equivalent, that brings that number to $934,000 when you have to give Kannapolis City Schools their share. What the manager's budget proposed was to put 50% in the school's budget on July 1st and wait until the second month's ADM count to find out what the true student numbers were, because there are variances when you're getting estimates from the charter school students as to how many of those kids really are at the charter schools or really are staying with the county. So the concept of what was placed into the budget was to give 50% up front and to do an evaluation at the second month ADM count.
And Mr. Craven, just so that you know, and the Board of Commissioners knows, we are totally fine with a true-up after the fact, after that second month. That's not a point of contention. That's the true way that it should be done. We don't, we want the number to be accurate, and that's the only way to get an accurate number. So that part of it is not, we're not contesting.
And if we could just, on this charter school piece, turning to the budget request, it looks like last year we were allocated approximately $1.5 million for charter schools. Our allocation request this year was $3 million. Is the $827,000 in addition to what we were given last year for charters, or is that the total amount? We're just trying to understand the line items.
The 827 would be addition to.
Great, so an additional to over what we received last year. Yeah,
Correct.
great.
And what was the total? Eight and some change?
827,000 even.
827. Okay. Well, just.
Mr. Craven, for background, would you like me to go through how the charter school allocation works for your benefit?
Tell me, I guess I want to make sure that both sides understand each other, and it's not necessary that I understand all the details, as long as I'm comfortable that you do. So I guess I'm going to ask them, do you all need an explanation of how you went through it? Or is that helpful? Do you think it's
I was thinking that in terms of you understanding what our number is based on and what the what the request is.
Is the request different from?
Yes.
From last year's number?
Yes, because of an additional 931 students.
Okay. Which, I just understood everybody saying that you're gonna do a count of the actual count.
Well, they proposed to do an actual count, but they capped it at the 827 plus the 1.5. So if it comes out greater than that, we're making up the difference. And that's the piece that's the contention of our board, is what the actual number is for the total number of charter students versus what the cap is for the funding that they've given us.
Okay. Is that a correct interpretation of the additional money for charter school students?
The additional money that is in the budget for Cabarrus County Schools inclusive is $827,000 based on the discussion that the finance director and Dr. Shepard and Mr. Downs had.
If the number of students exceeds and the formula for reimbursement for charter school students exceeds that amount of money, is there more money coming from the county, or is the interpretation correct that it's a school board's problem at that point?
The number is limited to $827,000.
I guess I'm not conversant with how you calculate the formula, but I'm presuming that it's a per capita based on the number of students enrolled in charter schools.
Right. We currently know how many of our students were enrolled in how many Cabarrus County students were enrolled in charter schools for the previous school year.
Right.
And we have some estimates, and we do some of our own estimation, and we work with the Department of Public Instruction, and our staff also contacts various charter schools to get an idea what their enrollment numbers are for next year.
Okay.
There's a little bit of a crystal ball we have to look into to try to figure out what that number is.
Okay.
And we understand that is how you guys came up with the 827 in addition. I think the board, and board speak out if you think I'm incorrect, the board's request would be, even with the additional 827,000, that still leaves us under what our original request was for charter schools students for the coming fiscal year. And I think our position would be that we would like to have an additional cushion on top of the additional $827,000 to do a true-up in the event that the numbers err to the higher side of that.
Okay, just for my information, is there a dollar figure per capita per charter school students?
It's the entire local funding, so whatever the school board, whatever the county commission provides to the school for a traditional public school student, that same amount of money
Okay.
flows to the charter
Okay,
school.
so it's not something that is concrete, it floats according to how much money is going into the local school?
It is concrete per student, but the number of students is not concrete until we get
Okay.
to the second month of ADM.
Okay, all right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, in our discussions, there was a number that the schools were proposing. However, there was the insinuation that there might be up to, at minimum, 400 duplicates. So we did not fund the duplicates. So we pulled it back to the 902 of what we had all agreed upon that day. It would not include the duplicates. If for some reason at the end of the 2 months that the number is higher, then you would have the opportunity to come back. The board has a contingency that they can use, but it's totally up to the board at that time. So, I mean, that's where the number came from. We had a number, we understood your number, but we also understood that there was going to be duplicates. So we did not fund the duplicates.
That number's new to me.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll tell you what, if it's my understanding that number was 1931, I think was that, I don't have that in front of me, for total students. We had 1,000 last year, and we thought we were going to add 931. If there's 400 that are in question, if 1931 less the 400 equals your number, and then we would get a commitment to do a true-up on the true number after that, I think our board would be okay with that. All we're looking for is the true funding, since it's a pass-through. We don't want that expense to come out of the funds that we get, and it not an extra student or not an extra any extra money, just a true-up on the actual number of students. And as it currently sits, we don't get that. We're under that 827 doesn't cover that, but that can be a point of agreement between the two boards, if we can get a commitment on the true one.
Okay. All right.
Anything else, Steve?
I've got a question. So the agreed upon number you said was 1931? Is that,
That's my recollection.
okay. And so that, and
That's not- That's not the number.
1913.
That's not the number we were.
okay, so who was at this meeting whenever this was agreed upon? If there was a number that, if Mike Down's saying there was a number that was agreed upon, who all agreed on this number?
It was a telephone conversation between Ms. Dubois and myself, Dr. Shepard and Kelly, Ms. Klutz, correct? That was on the phone. So maybe the question here is, I don't think we thought we agreed on a number, but maybe we didn't agree on the number because I don't believe 1,900 was the number.
The way the information was presented is that we have the ADM estimate from the state. We have the estimate from Cabarrus County Schools for the charter school students, which gives us the entire estimated population. It was compared to last year's population, and there is an anticipated growth of 1,302 new students. And the way it was explained to us is if we funded the growth in new students, the charter school funding would be satisfactory from your side. There was a discussion that up to 400 of those students were duplicated, potentially. So we took the 1,302 minus 400, came up with 902 students. We came into calculations of $827,000 to potentially cover those new students. It was requested for us to fund the $300,000 from the previous year, and we did not address that. But when we left the conversation, in anticipation of there potentially being 902 new students, that's where the $827,000 calculation came from. Because it was explained to us that the reason that you couldn't meet your charter school payment was because we did not fund the growth in new students. We worked together because what we learned this past year from a chair-vice chair meeting was that we were never informed that the charter school students were being taken away from your student population. I learned that at a conference. I had conversations with Kelly. We worked hard to try to get this information together to remedy the situation so that we would have a better understanding what your true population was. And that's where we came up with these sheets and calculations and came into the growth of new students, took out the 400, and came to the 902 to the 827,000. So that's the basis of the story of how we got to that point.
And this is, I think this is what we're struggling with is, I'm looking at our original budget request. And for this year, we were working on 1,915 projected students, and we had a $3 million request. If we take what we received last
Sarah,
year.
excuse me, can you make sure you,
Yeah.
yeah, I just want to make sure it picks it up. Sometimes
Okay.
it picks up and sometimes it's been going in and out and everybody here wants to make sure they
Not
hear.
a problem.
I apologize for interrupting.
No, thank you. Our budget proposal was based on 913 students, and it was $3,041,000. If I understand, you all are giving us what we received last year plus an additional $827,000. That still brings us about $600,000 short on funding 1,900 students. Unless I'm missing something. If we look at 1.5 last year plus an additional 827, that brings us to 2.4. And I think that may be where the
And that's-
confusion's coming from.
And that's in addition we were $300,000 short last year that we got into our pocket to cover. So we asked for that and didn't get it, and then we were asking for the truer number of what we think the actual number of students is going to be. So the logic of, obviously, we don't want to double count. We want the number to be true. In our attorney's opening statement, she stated, there seems to be confusion over charter schools. Well, I think we've kind of demonstrated that there's confusion over the number of students in charter schools. And I'm going to reiterate, all we're asking for, since it's a pass-through, is the true funding of the pass-through. Because that's, those are the students that are not in Cabarrus County schools.
Okay.
So,
And the request for those, for the $3 million includes the 400 duplicated students.
okay.
There's potentially
So the
out
number
there,
may
so-
be closer than we realize, and that's good.
Correct. I just wanted to point that
Yes.
out, that number would need to be recalculated, subtracting those 400 duplicated students, if that is a true statement that they turn
Okay.
out to be.
And our
So we may
finance
be closer.
our finance director is not here today.
Okay.
But if we go in to consult with council, we might be able to get her on the telephone and figure out if that 2.4, how close that number is,
Okay.
and that might be something that we can agree on.
Okay.
So I have a question. Going back to what Pam had mentioned as far as an agreement with a number for this year that included Dr. Shepard and Kelly Klutz, do you feel like what she said was accurate, what you guys agreed on? My question is for Dr. Shepard.
Right. I think there was confusion as to what was agreed to that day. I'm certainly acceptable with the resolution that we proposed today, and that the same amount of per pupil funding for the 30,000 plus students that we have enrolled in the Cabarrus County schools, the same per pupil funding then should be given as part of the pass-through.
So where do you think the confusion was? Okay.
All of it's confusing. As Ms. Dubois said, she
Right.
found out just this year that the way the state makes the calculation is different than what we all thought the
Right.
previous year.
And I know we've had multiple conversations about the charter schools and the funding. And I understand that it's a very difficult formula and, funding structure. But that's where I just wanted to find out from that meeting, if we felt like we had an agreement on our behalf, that's where I just wanted to see where the breakdown was.
So is it fair to say that there's an understanding, if not necessarily of the exact number, of the structure of an agreement on the funding from the county for the charter school component of the operating request? Is that fair?
I believe so, and to reiterate, it's the school board's position that we want the same dollar amount for however many charter school students end up being enrolled during the next school year as we receive for the students who are enrolled with us, since it's a direct pass-through cost. And if that number is higher or lower than the 1,900 currently in the budget, I think that would meet our satisfactory needs of making sure that we get that, whatever that 1-for-1 is, and we can do a true-up. But if there's 5 more students, we would request funding for those 5 additional students.
One of the things I think too, they need to understand too, if it goes the other way, I think they would feel comfortable if it is the other way, it would be that. We're just saying it'd be a true number.
That's right. I'll reiterate, we just want it to be a true number. And if there's a cap on 824, that's not acceptable. 827, that's not acceptable to our board. Because we don't know what the
I
number's going to
guess
be.
my question is there an understanding of the parameters of the request and the response so that it can be worked out in a written memorandum between the two finance professionals involved?
I think
Or
we'd
not.
have to,
You have to-
I think we'd have to have a discussion
Okay,
by our board of whether
Right.
that would be acceptable.
Okay.
I think the way this worked, at least from the county's perspective, is that we try to develop a good budget number so that it would be something that could be put in the budget and approved
Yeah.
at that number. And I think that there was comfort that we had had that covered pretty well. But as was expressed earlier, if it turns out that there are more than was anticipated, then that, at this point, would have to come back to the board for approval.
Okay.
So I think we would have to have a discussion, or the board would have to have a discussion and decide if they're willing to agree, for purposes of this mediation, that if it can be demonstrated there are more students, that they would commit to fund it.
Okay.
I think that's what we would need to do.
All right,
We'd
yeah.
have to have that discussion
Okay,
separately.
if I understand it, there's a commitment on the county's part to take a particular figure, which is 827, and take 50% of that and give that to the school board on July the 1st, and then count the actual charter students in the second month of school, and if the 50% is insufficient, to go into a contingency to increase that to what the actual figure is. If it's more than is necessary, then you don't need the full 827. Is that right?
We were going on the growth of students in population from last fiscal year to this fiscal year, and that is inclusive of charter school students. So it's
Well,
probably the same
I-
concept, but I just wanted to clarify that
Okay.
it was the growth in new students.
Pam, a question I have is on the duplicate counting of the students. Is that where, we're saying 913 new students will go to charter schools, but then we're also saying we're going to have 30,000 some odd in our school district. Are we thinking that some of those 900 we're also thinking are going to go to our school district, and so therefore, in reality, we'll have 400 fewer in our district than we think? Is that where the confusion comes? Because before this, I've never heard any question about the numbers from the individual charter schools being duplicative.
The way DPI explained to me that the system works is the students are in the Cabarrus County population number. If they choose during the summer, they were in Cabarrus County schools, this school term 14. If they choose in 15 to go to the charter school, they're in that student count that was given to us for Cabarrus County schools in April. When Kelly polls the charter schools to find out how many students they're going to have, and they know that that kid's crossing over, Kelly's got the kid, the charter school's got the kid. And it's a delayed reaction. Once the kid goes to charter school, the next term when they do the April count, the kid's no longer in your count for Cabarrus County schools. They've now moved to the school district of the charter school, and the process goes again to anybody brand new who wants to go to the charter school to have that potential duplication count. And because the cap was taken off recently and the skyrocket change of the students is what's causing this astronomical change in this cost and made it more noticeable for us to start addressing, and that's why we started doing some more research. Because our initial presentation was that the Cabarrus County school population was going down this fiscal year, and it was because the charter school kids had been pulled out of your count, and nobody bothered to tell us that that's how the system worked until I went to a conference and learned that information. And that's when we felt like we needed to rectify this, because you guys are paying for something that we don't think you have anymore, but you really do have, because you have to pass the money through. So the way we were recording it wasn't working anymore for everybody to have a complete understanding of you really don't have the kid in school, but you still have to pay for the kid. So I hope that kind of clears that up.
It does, and I don't want to go back and keep saying the same thing. All we're interested in is the true number. And I guess what we would want is a commitment from the commissioners that says on the second month, and taking 50% in July, that's perfectly reasonable. Because we don't know the number, you don't know the number. That is a perfectly reasonable way to do it. But the second month's ADM, which everything is based on, we want to be able to provide you, here's the number of students that Cabarrus County Schools has, here's the number of students that we're having to pass through to the charter school, and that's the number that needs to be funded. And that to me, or in discussions with our board, that's what's acceptable to our board. So I'm hopeful just in knowing how we've discussed this at chair, vice chair meetings, that we can, I think we have an understanding of how it works and what the best way to go about doing it is. And I'm hopeful that if we take the 1,590,000 that we had, the 827 that they approved Monday night, which was the 2.4 that Ms. Stone referenced earlier, if we do the 50% of that and then do a true up on after that, that may be close to being the number, but it may be off one way or the other. We'll give back, or we won't take any more than we absolutely have to take.
I would like to point out too, but because we've changed this methodology and we've added the charter school students into your total population, the per pupil amount will go down. Because now you have more kids than what we calculated off of before. Because we initially presented the budget to you, we only calculated it off of the state population. We did not include the charter school. So your per pupil number would be higher because now you've got estimated of 13 more kids to divide that grand total over, and it would be reduced.
Yeah, I think we need some further clarification on this. So
If your grand total allocation, let's just say it was $60 million, and you had 30,000 students, now you have 37,000 students, the per pupil gets smaller because the grand total number didn't change, but the number divided by got bigger. Did that make sense?
Well, yeah, I understand the math. I'm just not sure where you're going with.
That's how per pupil is calculated. The recommendation we were given from the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners when I had discussions with them on how to fix this problem was that we should be counting charter school kids in your student population because you still have to pay for them.
Suppose going forward, if we know that's the way the total funding's going to be, then this document probably looks a little bit different the next time around, because we're looking at our 30,000 that we need to provide services for. That's what our budget request is based on. All we're looking at for the 1,900 or how many ever other charter schools is, that's just the pure pass-through. It's just a number that's going, directly through us to the other thing. So, I mean, I guess from a mathematical perspective, I understand exactly what you're saying, but from our budget perspective, I think that if we're going to look at it that way, it's going to change the way we're going to do our process, unless I'm not understanding that correctly.
I just want to ask a question. So you said the per pupil amount goes down because the grand total doesn't change, but then on Monday night you voted to increase the amount by $827,000. So I would have thought that amount was supposed to keep everything even. If we're not getting any additional money and we're having to accommodate paying for 2,000 more students, then this is not an acceptable solution.
What was funded Monday night was 50% of the charter school money, 467,000, somewhere in that ballpark. That's what's been placed into your current expense line item. The other money is sitting in board contingency, so at this point, it's not part of your per pupil money. Until it crosses over, it doesn't become part of your per pupil money, just like the salary increases that we have for teachers that's in contingency, waiting for the state to make up a decision on what they're going to do, sits in contingency until they make their decision, and then we appropriate the money to you.
That's where I'm getting a little confused, and I, granted, haven't been here but a couple years, but we've never been funded on a per pupil basis. I mean, you can do the math, but that's not the way we get our funding. So when you say, when you're using the word per pupil or on a per pupil funding, we don't get funding that way. In Cabarrus County, at least that's not the way we've done it since, I mean, Carolyn, you've been here longer and you've sat on that side of the table, so, I mean, I don't know if you know, but, well, ADM's state money.
Well, the ADM count, yeah.
Well, the ADM count, but, so, I mean, again, I understand the mathematics, but, and maybe we're dancing around the same thing here, but.
I'd be glad to sit down with the numbers and calculate them out and show a comparison.
Well, that may be beneficial and.
Because if that per pupil number were to go down based on the increase in population, that's less money you have to give to the charter schools also. because they get the per pupil that's calculated for your school district.
Yes, that is correct. And that's
So
what we're asking for.
This may not be an issue as big as we think it is unless we sit down and actually plug the numbers in
Right.
and come up with
And-
results.
And that's, well, last year it was a $300,000 issue. So we would like for that to be a $0 issue on our side of the table. And that's all we're
Okay.
after.
All right. I guess I want to ask if we want to continue in this mode or move toward a working group that can maybe deal with the numbers and see what there's different understandings of in the kind of detail. Is this format the best way to move this kind of subject? I have one shaking head no.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think that, as Pam has said, that you've got to be able to sit down and do the math, and I don't see that we're going to be able to do that right now.
Yeah.
So that's why I shook my head no.
Yeah.
The other question I guess I would have is the charter school funding, or what other topics need to be discussed?
That's,
So, because I think that at this point, we have to do some math in order to come to an understanding. And we can't definitively say right now what that number's going to be, because, I mean, I would agree with you in what everybody said, and I thought that the proposal of looking at the second month ADM was logical, which is not a number that we can agree to today, because obviously we're not there yet. So I don't think that there can be full resolution on it until we can get a better understanding of a very complex issue that all of us have agreed is a very complex issue. And I truly believe that our staff has tried very hard to work with your staff to get an understanding of that issue. So, I mean, I think that great effort has been made. And so I think that needs to be they need to have more conversations to get to that. So the other thing would be, I don't know what else, we didn't have any conversations prior to this meeting of what your concerns were. And so that's why I don't have any comments at this time, because I don't know what the other additional concerns were. So.
And I think if we want to leave that as an aside, I think that is better addressed at a smaller level. I think we've got a couple other of the bigger issues that we'd like to bring up so they can hear them, and then at that point in time, it may be beneficial to do something else.
Bring up the issue instead of trying to work out the arithmetic. Let's move into that conversation so that everybody's aware of exactly where the disagreements are.
I think for our clarity and to make sure we're prioritizing things correctly, also looking at the revisions the manager presented on Monday, we were trying to understand the changes in the additional building maintenance allowance. It looks as if the amounts there for us were adjusted downward due to some salary increases, and we're just trying to understand where that is so that we're able to kind of clearly articulate, here's what we asked for and here's what we're receiving, and this is where the gap exists. And I'm referring to, it's pages 2 and 4 of the manager's handout from Monday night. It looks as if on building maintenance, $187,000 was decreased to additional fund school salary increases, and took us down from $530,000, which is still significantly less than our initial ask, to $343,000 for building maintenance. And we're just trying to make some sense of those numbers.
The reason for that calculation and change is that we had initially the Senate's budget request for teachers' salaries and state employee increases. Then the House came out, and then we went back and looked at the governor's. And we opted to go with the governor's budget because it was the highest number to make sure we had enough money in contingency to meet that requirement, should that be what happens. We removed all capital from Cabarrus County's budget to help implement those salary changes, and we were short some money to make up those differences. So we went and proratedly took away some of the increase we anticipated to give for building maintenance. in order to make sure we had enough money set aside to meet the salary increases, should the governor's budget be the one that gets adopted.
I think that there again, that's something that, to avoid what we just went through, that we're going to have to sit and talk about. Because it sounds to me like we've had to trade building maintenance for salaries.
Next item is, in our budget request, we had $1.2 million of an increase in our operating budget simply to cover our continuation costs. It appears that that has not been fully funded, and we'd appreciate to have some conversation about why those continuation costs were not fully funded. Again, these are the costs needed for administrative staff to open the new school, as well as health insurance and hospital coverage and state retirement funding insurance increases for this year.
Increase in utility costs, and part of that health care was Affordable Care Act, which was a total of about $400,000.
Could you clarify which new school's opening this fall?
No, I don't, you did say new school opening, and I don't think that was part of it, because it's next year.
For
We've actually adjusted, we have adjusted the start date of it.
Okay, I understand that our initial budget request for that item has been delayed because of a delayed start date. So this would just be for the state increases, the utility costs, the retirement, hospitalization, and affordable care. Back that number out.
However you want to say that.
Okay. I think there are some smaller items I think we can talk about in the working group more effectively, but we do want to have a candid conversation about our capital outlay requests. We were requested to include all of our capital outlay needs in this budget, and as you all know, they were very significant, both for new construction as well as maintenance at some of our existing facilities. Our capital outlay allocation this year was just over $1 million, which is exactly the same as we received last year for the non-facilities part of our capital outlay. Just want to have some conversation with you guys as to where we could possibly go, and we're happy to talk about the district's priorities in capital outlay. The budget documents we've presented did outline those priorities and give them to you, but between the new schools that need to be built, as well as some of the smaller projects of roof replacement and so forth, those are some of the items I think we need to go through, and we can obviously look at the justification documents to the extent we need to. And I'm happy to hand out copies of our budget requests. That would be helpful to you all to go through those lists. We'd like to direct your attention to our capital projects over $500,000, and those begin, we tried to apply uniform page numbering to the bottom of this document to make it easier to look at. It's page 11 and 12 in the bound book that we just handed out to you, which is our original budget request. Page 11 has our 5-year plan for over $500,000 capital projects, and if you turn to the next page, the spreadsheet, we have it prioritized, beginning with the new elementary school, our top significant capital requests over $500,000.
Mr. Craven, the first two schools listed are the ones that, as Mr. Cook pointed out, there was $29 million appropriated for two schools. Well, neither one of them hit the mark of what the school board approximated the cost and what we needed to build either school. So there was a total of 29. We asked for a total of, I can't remember the number now off the top of my head, but basically the elementary school was short $2 million. The middle school replacement was short $6.5 million.
When you say short, you mean it costs more than?
Well, in our estimate, the project estimate, as we move forward to commit to replacing a school, and we present to them what we think it's going to take. Our estimate was $22 million on the middle school, and the funding that we received, and we have received it, in fact, we've done a budget amendment, so we have it, is 15.5.
But we did make it clear that at any time, the board could come back, you know, and have discussions about additional funding on that project. So it wasn't just cut and dry, that was it. It was pretty well discussed that there could be further discussions at the time.
Yeah, and it's our contention that that's not the proper way that the board is supposed to function. You know, it's our job to determine what the educational needs are and what we think it's going to take, and their job to fund it, and then if it comes in under that, they get it back. If we go through the bid process with construction documents and find out that we've missed the mark, well, then that's on us. But to partially fund and then say, well, just come back, we did hear it, and that's what was said. We just don't believe that's in the true power of what the two boards are statutorily bound to be able to perform. Anything else?
No, I think that's.
We think that kind of hits the highlights of what, I think there was one more item on that list, though, which was leaky roofs at $8 million. So, I mean, the grand, one of the things, and I want to reiterate what Ms. Stone had said originally, in at least the 3 years that I've been on the board, we did go into the budget sessions and communications with the mindset of, well, we can't ask for, this because we're not going to get that. So let's whittle that down and figure out where we need to be. And we certainly understand what the budget constraints are with the Board of Commissioners. No question about that. This, after a couple years of trying to figure out how we're going to tackle what we've got to tackle, this budget request, we decided that we wanted to at least be able to show, here's what we have out there. We certainly didn't, that number is $100 and some million. To think that we would get that in one budget year is unreasonable. We did not think that. But we've got to be able to show, here are the needs of the system, so that we can put a plan together to address those needs going forward. So the four major topics at the top of that list were the two schools that I previously mentioned to make the two projects whole, plus a replacement at Royal Oaks, which is another elementary school, and leaky roofs. So the total of that subgroup then is $33,901,538. Is that a fair summation? Does anybody, our board, want to make a comment or an adjustment to that? Okay.
I've got a question going back where we were just mentioning the $1.2 million the operating budget increase request, and you had mentioned administrative staff, health insurance, utility cost, and on page 3 of the packet you just handed out, the new school operating request is in there, staffing request, that second, so that's why we would not fund that.
Yes, that's been pushed out.
Okay, but that's not been pushed out of the 1.2 million. That all adds up to 1.2 million, so there's.
That's correct, and that's
Right.
what Ms. Stone.
And then also, the number 1, we funded the top 2, the increase, the top 2 numbers, the 166, the all other salaries and the increase to teachers, we funded those top 2 numbers.
I don't think so.
That funding's been placed in contingency pending the adoption of the state budget, whether it's the governor's, the senate's, or the house.
Okay.
That's one of the
There you go.
first items we'd discussed. So that 1.2 number is really cut in half whenever you add up all that, so just want to make sure everybody's clear.
Yep.
All right. Anything from the county commissioners that can be?
Not at this time.
Okay. Have we done then what we want to do in this setting?
My board's comfortable.
Okay. All right. Then can we retire to another space to meet with the working groups?
You can go back to the 2 conference rooms.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm not clear. Do we have to recess, or the public meetings for both boards remain in session, right? We're just,
I think it depends on what your request is. If you want us to recess and just convene the working groups, we can do that, or we can close this public meeting and then just,
I think for the
Convene in the
time
working
being, let's
groups.
keep them open, and let's let me go talk to the working groups together and see what an agenda is, and then see what kind of time frame we might be looking at. Is that all right?
That's fine. I think we would just need to recess, but keep the recess until later this afternoon.
Okay.
We're only taking one anyway, yeah. The statute sets out who should be in the working group unless the 2 boards agree otherwise. So what we would like to do is have our chair and vice chair, and of course our county manager, and Ann Wilson, our finance director, or Pam, excuse me. Pam Dubois would be the person in the role of the finance director. And then, of course, myself. So we would be adding one person to our working group in the form of our vice chair, if that's acceptable to you all.
I believe we're acceptable with that. Our vice chair is not here today, and so we would ask that our chair be permitted to bring in a designee as a second member.
I don't have any problem with that. That's fine.
Okay.
Sure.
The other would be another board member. Right,
Correct.
not a staff member. it
No,
would be a board
correct.
member.
Yeah, and our finance director's not here, but we do have Ed Emery, who works in the finance department, so.
Okay. All right. You want to take a 10-minute break?
Okay, so just to clarify, are we going to recess So we will recess ours and you will recess yours, and then we will move down into the conference room and everybody else will stay in here. That's
Yeah.
what we're doing. I just want to make sure we all understand.
And we're going to reconvene a little later.
Yeah,
So
we're going to
everybody needs-
recess to this afternoon, so we'll be back in here.
Right.
Yes,
We would have to do another motion in here before we leave today.
right.
I just want to make sure these people are here, and you
Okay.
have additional staff, we have additional staff, make sure everybody understands. So
Okay.
if that's acceptable, then I will make a motion that the Board of Commissioners recess this meeting to sometime this afternoon. I'm just leave it open because I don't know how long we're going to be down the road. So I will make that motion. Do I have a second, Commissioners? Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay.
And Board of Education members, I need a motion that we recess to a time sometime later this afternoon. Well, a motion by Mr. Harrison and second by Mr. Walter. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, this board is in recess.